Hi everyone, this is Ali John Chaudhary, Psychotherapist, and this is Brothers, Sisters, Strangers video podcast. And today we have a very special episode because Fern Schumer Chapman is with us, and we're going to be looking at Fern's book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling Estrangement and the Road to Reconciliation. So this is a very important book that we have here because it's just chock full of a life story and experiences that a number of our community can relate to. And I think that that's really important for us to highlight because this is now approaching close to 1 year since the book is out. So thank you so much for being here, Fern. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here, and it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about Brothers, Sisters, Strangers and what I've learned over the course of a year. The book actually came out for National Siblings Day last year, and we are coming up once again on that event, which is, of course, a very difficult day for those who are estranged.
Yes, very much. You're absolutely right. So this is a very important book. So I'm really glad that this hit the market because it needs to get out more in the mainstream. And I think that for me, this really hit a resounding note in terms of the landscape about sibling estrangement. You described so much of what a lot of us go through and the uncertainty that we're left with in terms of answers and such, So your narrative was really, for me, all too familiar. And it just talked about the callousness and the unexpressed potential that we're forced to experience whenever estrangement sets in.
Part of the reason I was inspired to write the book is that, number one, I was in so much pain during the 40 years I was estranged from my only brother. And number two, I felt so alienated. There was nobody to talk to. There weren't really support groups. And so I didn't know which way to turn. And the result of that was that I ruminated. And as you know, that's probably one of the most unproductive things you can do with your brain and your time. But I couldn't stop it. And so the way I work through many of my worries and really my thoughts is through writing. And I recognize that if my brother, with whom I eventually reconciled, would be tolerant of my telling the story, that it would resonate with you and many, many others. And I think finally break out this very stigmatized topic into a more open forum.
Absolutely. I think that this is really important to be able to bring this out in the open like you described. And it's obviously something that happens to a number of people. This is not an isolated event. I think that a number of people don't get along well with family members and have issues that arise that cause them to experience estrangement. So it's already been a year now since the book has been out. So I mean, the book is selling more now, and because the word is getting out. And I just wanted to see how you thought the book was received now that it's been 1 year into it.
Well, I have two responses to that. First of all, obviously the book came out in a rather inopportune moment. It came out during COVID, which meant that I was denied the opportunity to speak at conferences and do a book tour. And all of these things are really crucial to book sales. The book is selling well. It's a word of mouth book. You can see on some of the private Facebook pages that you run that people discover it and start to talk about it, and then others start picking up on it. I've learned a lot over the course of the year. I knew sibling estrangement was common. I would say what I discovered over the last year is that it's almost like a Me Too movement. And what do I mean by that? I mean, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to admit to it. And yet it's there. And most of us feel very embarrassed and humiliated and stigmatized by the fact that we can't get along with our siblings.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. I think it really plays out in the way you've described in that way with regards to, being able to touch upon the communities that we are part of in that way. Because, like you said, you had some challenges when it came out, when the book came out, because of the fact that, COVID hit and such, this had to become more focused along online groups and such, as you said, because of everything that you could not do face to face,
Mhm.
so I think what's interesting is that it still did something. It spoke to a number of people
Right.
despite those challenges.
Actually, one of the things that I'm delighted about is it got a lot of publicity, a lot of attention in the press. Oprah Daily, today.com, USA Today, all of these publications began to write about the fact that there are those of us in the world who simply cannot sustain a relationship with our siblings, and that we have this terrible sense of failure sometimes, not always. Obviously, some toxic relationships mean that you have to cut off, and those of us who have made that choice feel like this was protective and the best thing we could do for ourselves. And finally, the media is beginning the process of identifying these problems and making those of us who have struggled feel less stigmatized.
You're absolutely right. I think that that's really important in terms of what you just mentioned there, and it's you've really you really hit the nail on the head. I think when it comes to that, a lot of people are picking up on it, and a lot of people are starting to get interested in that particular Me Too movement, especially, and you've probably received a lot of questions through the mail, I'm assuming here, because of the book, because of the fact that it's such a sensitive subject, but yet applies to a number of people on the spectrum in terms of estrangement and such.
Well, yes, and many people express great appreciation for the fact that there's finally a book out there which, number one, documents my own rebuilding of my relationship with my brother in the wake of terrible mistrust and betrayal. I mean, how does one go about doing that? And of course, the book itself takes you along on that journey, and almost conversation by conversation shows you what it was like to have my brother back in my life.
And
Um,
I really like that. I really like what you said there, because for me, it weaved the transition between facts and personal narrative. It's like you could see these examples you were giving popping up and making it into real life. So we're learning and journeying with you as you move along through your life story. I thought that was really interesting, and for me, the book really felt alive because of that.
Thank you. Well, that was the goal. The goal was to bring the reader along on this journey. And each chapter starts with the personal narrative. And then the second half of each chapter addresses some issue that I raise in the personal narrative. So, for example, one day my brother reaches out while we're in the deepest depths of estrangement. He reaches out on Twitter, and he doesn't have a picture on his Twitter account. So I just hear that Scott Schumer has suddenly wants to follow me. And I had this mixture of reactions, because on the one hand, it was like, wait a minute, you're not going to talk to me, but you're interested enough to follow my life. And I felt very violated in some ways by that. So I then take that question and that issue of social media and explore it and how it affects the estranged. And social media, as you know, is a very complicated universe for those of us who are cut off from our family members.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I think there's a risk in isolation when it comes to that, but there's also, on the upside, a risk in connecting with people. And
Right.
that's been what we've been offering in terms of resources with regards to that, is to create a hub where people can go, with both your material, your articles on Psychology Today, your website, the Facebook page, Sibling Estrangement, Sharing, Coping, Connecting. So it's there where people can connect with people, and of course, the support groups and such. So it's really interesting in terms of what you brought up in terms of your brother there. I'm curious to know, with regards to that, has your relationship continued to change with your brother since the book's been published?
Yes. So, yes, he and I established over the course of a year a much improved new relationship. And really, in some ways, it was like getting to know him for the first time because we didn't know each other much as adults as a result of this terrible divide and estrangement. Um, one of the ways in which he drew the line, which was fascinating to me, is he was willing to support me as I wrote the book. And he even went as far as filling out my survey and writing the afterword. But then when the Today Show had expressed interest in having us both on, oh, he backed away. He was aghast. He would have no part of radio or television. Well, anyway, he and I were talking one day, and I always kept him in the loop about what was going on as far as media. And a public radio station in North Carolina had contacted me, and they had asked if my brother would participate as well. And I knew how he felt, so I said, well, no, that's not a possibility. So he and I were casually talking. I said, oh, yeah, and some radio station asked if you might want to participate. And he said, well, when is it? So I was stunned, and I let it go because I didn't think he was serious about it. And then a few weeks later, he said, when is that interview?
Yeah.
I said, why? And he said, well, I think I want to do it. So what I'm trying to illustrate for you is I think by telling and retelling his story, and he certainly read all the articles and listened to all the interviews, it kind of took the terror out of the experience. And eventually he was willing not just to have me tell the story, but to make it his own as well. And that is part of the healing process. And so I think, to my great delight, he now is doing interviews with me. So he's really come a long way. And the actual experience of writing the book and marketing the book has had its own bonding effect.
It sounds like it was a healing journey for the both of you with regards to this in your own ways, Yeah,
I think he felt at first embarrassed and sorry and remorseful of what had happened. But then he realized we could take it into something productive, which is how you heal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And he has joined me now on the journey of spreading the word about sibling estrangement and the devastation it causes in individual lives. And again, I always feel like I have to provide a caveat. And the caveat is if that sibling is not violent or toxic or seriously damaging to your sense of self. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my brother was never any of those things. There are relationships that are too toxic to sustain. That was never the case for me. I want to say one other thing. You asked earlier about the ways in which the book has been received. I've gotten a few questions about possibly offering my book as a gift to somebody who's estranged from a sibling, and they want to use it to facilitate some sort of reconciliation, which I thought was fascinating. I don't recommend that you simply send it out of the blue. I think what you should do is ask if they would be receptive to to understanding sibling estrangement and reading this book and then moving forward from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy as well with regards to at least getting consent with this. I think that's important because we don't want to enforce anything on anyone in that way. I think that's the main thing. But it's good that you bring that distinction up, because I was going to that leads me to my next question, as a matter of fact, and it was the word reconciliation in the subtitle. That can be misleading to readers because it says sibling estrangement and the road to reconciliation. So could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. There have been some questions about the content of the book because there's this assumption that it's all about reconciliation. In fact, I was devastated by the decades-long estrangement. And most of the book is an exploration of what that estrangement did to me and why I was willing to go back and try to rebuild the relationship. The book itself also discusses when you shouldn't go back and rebuild the relationship. And so I look at it as really the book attempts to cover all of the bases, but it is certainly not promoting reconciliation. Reconciliation did work for me, and it has had a wonderful outcome, but I don't believe that in any way I am advocating that anybody choose this path. I'm simply illustrating what that path has looked like for me.
And I think that's an important distinction that you're making, because I think that that's very much the case. I think that it's a case-by-case basis, whether some people can feel as if they can go in that direction or some people they can't, you know. And what you illustrate is in that book, which I liked, was the idea of what a healthy reconciliation can potentially look like, provided both parties are willing, provided both parties are open to it, provided both parties are not getting in a power struggle. You know, I think that that was really important. And I think that that's one of the things that needs to be, of course, highlighted with regards to this. So, so I do think that that's a good clarification that you're bringing to this, you know, because this needs to be, you know, cleared up with some people.
Well, and there are all sorts of voices. I based this book on over 100 survey responders. So there are all sorts of voices in the book, and you hear mine, which is the framework for the book, but then you hear all the others, and many readers will not relate to mine, but they'll certainly relate to some of the other comments from people who are still estranged.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point you're making. You know, you take from the book what speaks to you, and you can leave aside what you don't. I think it's like anything else. I think there's some things that are going to speak to us more than others, you know. So I think that that's key to remember whenever we're reading a book. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So another question I had here was, I mean, you're writing now for Psychology Today, and I'd be interesting to see if that was because of the book, and what it is you hope to accomplish through your blog with Psychology Today.
Yes. So my publisher sent the book for review to psychologytoday.com, and I received a letter from an editor there who said that they probably weren't going to review the book, but would I like to be a contributor to the blog? And it's a wonderful opportunity. That particular site gets probably 100 million, it's international, so it gets probably 100 million people through there. Mm-hmm. And it's a very large platform. It's all over the world, as I said. And so it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And what I try to do is do about 3 blogs a month. And I try to make them personal, but also illuminating as far as issues of sibling estrangement. Mm-hmm. And I think that the beauty of the blog is that you can, reach a lot of people in a very short time and call attention to sibling estrangement in a way that's not as easily available for a book. So, you know, some people want to read 1,000 words, and this gives you 1,000 words 3 times a month rather than having to read a 60,000 word book at one sitting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my next question is, what's your mother's reaction to the book? She must obviously have her own thoughts about it.
Yeah. I feel very fortunate. My mother and brother have been very supportive about this project. I think my mother was in so much pain from the estrangement of her only daughter and son that she would have done anything to get past it. And she recognized that she may not look like she's portrayed in the best light, but it was worth it to her because, number one, she didn't want to see others suffering as she had. And that's something that we talk about a little bit, but not a lot this has a tremendous effect on other family members. And we've said this before, Ollie John, but I'm always come back to this. Sibling estrangement ripples through a life. It ripples through your own sense of self and self-esteem and your ability to trust, and of course, family relationships. And so it's not just about not talking to your brother or sister. It has this almost metastatic effect, like a cancer that pulls more and more organs in the family into it. And my mother couldn't tolerate it. And she had struggled with so many losses in her life. And this one was one she couldn't bear to add. So to answer your question, I think she's been remarkably supportive and really a cheerleader that the word should get out about this, not just because my brother and I, she wanted us to reconcile, but because she wanted others to recognize that there are other victims in this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's good. It's good that your mother understood what you were doing with this, because it's very important that the message get out. And of course, no parent likes to see their children not get along or be alienated from one another for whatever reason, right? So,
well, in my mom's case too, she lost her entire family when she was 12 years old to the Holocaust. And then she loses by choice her connection to the kids or the cohesiveness of the family when her son and daughter don't talk to each other.
and that's interesting. Perhaps we'll talk about this in another episode, perhaps, or in one of the blog entries that you or I may do. But it's about the loss of relationship. I think that there's a loss of relationship, but more of a sense of sensitivity, if you will, with regards to that loss once that happens after. So
yeah, I mean, I think for someone like her who has had this horrific childhood, and it was so far beyond her imagination that we would choose not to talk to each other when she had her family murdered.
yeah. So obviously, you know, it's extreme circumstances, and nobody wants to see people drawn apart and such, you know. But I'm glad to hear that the message you're bringing out, though, she seems on board with it, and she's very much in agreement with the idea of talking about it openly, so that way the conversation can be had, and we can continue to help people that are going through this. So Fern, we're actually we're almost out of time, so I know the conversation goes by super fast. So I just wanted to thank you for highlighting what the book has done, and the impact it's been having as well, and the challenges you've been having as well with regards to this at the time in which it came out. I think COVID made things difficult for a number of people, and you know, you're still here, your light is still shining out, and we are continuing, of course, to bring out these wonderful resources to help people. So thank you again for doing this. And
I just want to say that this is only one part of what you and I have tried to accomplish together, that we have created a base of resources for siblings who are estranged. The book is one, the blog is another, the private Facebook groups is another,
yep.
Your webpage, and I'm very proud of the fact that together we are on this journey to remove the stigma and bring about an important discussion on this topic.
Absolutely. And if people want to join in, they can, of course, take part in the online support group we have. That's twice monthly now. So if people are interested in joining, it's only $9.99 via PayPal, and it allows for people to get together to be able to talk about their experience, you know, and to empower themselves with others that are of like mind and that can be very much accepting of what is happening in their lives and understand that.
So many people in the estrangement support group say that they're there because they finally don't feel so alone. And that's precisely the reason that I've written this book and that you and I created these resources.
Absolutely. So I'll just let our viewers know to just read the description in terms of the resources we have. The Facebook page, Sibling Estrangement, Sharing, Coping, Connecting. Of course, there's your website. Of course, there's a link to your Psychology Today articles as well. Basically, people can, again, just pick up the book if you can. It's a wonderful book. And Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling Estrangement, and the Road to Reconciliation. So thank you again so much for doing this, Fern. It's been wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing your insights about the book and the journey you've walked on. And I look forward very much to continuing in our next episodes on Brothers, Sisters, Strangers video podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
For sure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.